So now let's talk about Boolean mask indexing. And suppose that we want to filter out those values in this array which are even. And as you know, the even numbers are divisible by 2. And when I say they are divisible by 2, I mean when you divide those number by 2, the remainder would be 0. So for example, 5 is not an even number. So when you divide that by 2, the remainder would be 1, not 0, because it is not divisible by 2. But for example, 12 is divisible by 2, so if you divide that by 2, the remainder would be 0. So in order to check whether a number is even or odd, you should check whether it is divisible by 2 or not. So let's do that. So in order to do so, we simply type x modulo operator and 2, which returns the remainder when we divide by 2. And we want to check whether this one is equal to 0. So let's print this. If I print this and if I run the code, you can see for the first one it is true because it is an even number. For this one it is false, and for this one it is false. For this one it is true. For 12 it is true, and also for 14 it is true. And let's store this in a variable, let's say called mask. And what do I mean by mask? As a matter of fact, mask is a bunch of true-false values which determines whether a condition is true or not. So as a matter of fact, our masks determine whether a number is even or not. So now we want to print the even numbers from the x array. So we simply type x and we want to index to those values which are even. So we use the mask. So this is called Boolean mask indexing. And as you know, our masks determines whether a number is even or not. So x sub mask returns the values which are even, which satisfy this condition. So now if I run the code, you can see these are the even numbers. But now let's suppose that we add a value, for example, a couple of negative values. So for example, -4, -2, and for example, -8. And now suppose that we want to filter out those values which are divisible by 2 and also they are positive. So we use the AND operator and we should add the other condition. And the other condition which you want to check is whether that number is positive or not. So we are going to check whether that number is positive and whether that number is divisible by 2. So if all of these conditions was true, then the mask is going to return true. And then we are going to index those values from the x array which satisfy these conditions in the mask. So now if I run the code, you can see here are the values which are divisible by 2 and also they are positive. So now let's take another example. Suppose that this is our array and we want to check whether a number is divisible by 2 or divisible by 3. So in order to do so, we simply type x modulo operator and 2 and is equal to 0. It means if the number is divisible by 2. And we want to check whether a number is divisible by 2 or, and for saying or, we can put a vertical line or so-called pipe in order to say or. And then we want to check, so we want to check whether a number is divisible by 2 or divisible by 3. So in order to check whether a number is divisible by 3, we can simply type x modulo 3 is equal to 0. So we are saying if the number is divisible by 2 or divisible by 3. And we store that in a variable, let's say called mask. And here we are using that mask in order to index those values which satisfy this condition. And this type of indexing is called Boolean mask indexing because these masks are Boolean values, true-false values. So now if I run the code, so you can see it returns those values which are divisible by 2 or divisible by 3. So for example, if I add another number, which is 9, as you can see 9 is not divisible by 2, but it is divisible by 3. So if I run the code again, you can see it returns 9 because it is divisible by 3. And now let's take another example. And as you can see, once again, I have added some negative numbers and I want to filter out those values which are positive, and they are divisible by 2 or divisible by 3. So this is the condition for saying whether they are divisible by 2 or divisible by 3. So this is the condition. but we want to say it should be positive as well. So we put a parenthesis around it, and we want to end this condition with the condition of being positive. So it should be positive, and it should be whether divisible to 2 or divisible to 3. That's it. And we put all the stuff in a variable, let's say, called mask, and we are using the Boolean mask indexing in order to filter out those values which satisfy this condition. So now if I run a code, you can see here's the output. And as you can see, it returns the values which are divisible by 2 or divisible by 3, but they are positive. Now I really suggest you to watch this video which is on the screen now.